Chapter 774. Zhou Xuanji became curious about the mortal god sisters on the light screen. Since the girl in red might be the same person as the mortal god of the Kunlun origin court, then who was this woman in the palace dress? At the same time, the two mortal gods were in a panic. "Sister, what should we do?" the red-clothed girl asked nervously. She had been curled up in the arms of the palace-dressed woman, hugging her tightly. The woman in the palace dress was also very nervous. Although they were mortal gods, they hadn't awakened their innate talent and their cultivation wasn't high. In the face of the powerful beast sovereign in front of them, they could only be frightened. The woman comforted him, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." They were in the middle of an array, protected by dozens of origin fusion divine lords. A great battle was taking place in front of them. The mortal divine range's old ancestors were surrounding beast sovereign. In the distance, there were still countless evil sky divine range experts blocking the way. There was no way to escape. If your mortal divine range doesn't cherish the mortal god, then leave it to me. Beast sovereign laughed wildly, his murderous aura thick and dense. The patriarchs of the mortal divine range almost exploded with rage. "Beast sovereign, you're courting death. Is your evil sky divine range worthy of fighting with our sovereign divine range? When we return, we will definitely bring an army to flatten your evil sky divine range. Don't talk nonsense with him. Kill him. You are too arrogant. This old man will make you regret it. Don't let him escape." All of these ancestors possessed remarkable abilities. Every move they made was extremely powerful and could shake the universe. Zhou Xuanji watched the battle from the dark space. The light screen that Beast Sovereign had turned on for him was always facing the mortal god sisters, so he couldn't see the whole battlefield. He waited patiently for an opportunity. "When we get out, we'll kidnap them. Get ready." Beast Sovereign's voice sounded again. And after 3 seconds, the dark space suddenly shattered. Zhou Xuanji was pulled to the mortal god sisters by a violent suction force. The mortal deities were also frightened and subconsciously retreated. Zhou Xuanji moved extremely quickly. He quickly reached out and pulled them into his arms. Then he cast the inverse chaos divine ability, reversing the space within a radius of 10 feet. The surrounding origin fusion divine lords were shocked and furious. Just when they were about to attack, Zhou Xuanji and the other two disappeared before their eyes. They were instantly dumbfounded. What was going on? They immediately used their divine sense to search, but they were unable to find any traces of Zhou Xuanji and the others. The expression of Beast Sovereign, who was fighting, changed. He suddenly felt that something was wrong, because he could not sense Zhou Xuanji's aura either. Where did that kid go? Zhou Xuanji looked at the murky space around him and was pleasantly surprised. Apart from the mortal god sisters next to him, he could no longer feel the aura of any other living beings. "What do you want?" the woman in the palace dress asked warily. The red-clothed girl in her arms was so scared that she almost cried. Zhou Xuanji looked back at them and said with a smile, "I heard that mortal gods can help people cultivate, so I need your help." As soon as he said this, the two women's faces turned pale. They naturally knew about these things. So, ever since they found out that they were mortal gods, they had been in despair. Who would have thought that misfortune would come so quickly? The girl in red gritted her teeth, her eyes red. She raised her right hand and prepared to stab her throat. "Don't be in such a hurry. The help I'm talking about isn't those lowly third-rate methods. I want to talk to you about cultivation methods. Otherwise, I wouldn't have allowed you to stand before me in scathe, right?" Zhou Xuanji immediately interjected. The two women were stunned after hearing this. He helplessly said, "I have 2 wives, a son, and a daughter. I'm not that desperate." The two women's eyes immediately lit up when they heard this. The woman in the palace dress asked with a frown, "Who are you? Can you tell us your name?" Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "My name is Zhou Xuanji. I'm not from your Kunlun origin court. In fact, the Kunlun origin court has 2 planes. The composition of living beings is the same, but the development is completely different. I come from the other plane. I want to become stronger, strong enough to leave this place." Hearing this, the girl in red excitedly asked, "Then can you take us with you? We also want to leave this place." They had also heard of the existence of anti-Kunlun before. As long as they left with Zhou Xuanji, they could get rid of the shackles of the mortal divine range and their destiny. Zhou Xuanji said meaningfully, "In the other Kunlun origin court, the mortal gods have the same destiny as you. However, if you help me become stronger, I will protect you in the future." The two women fell into despair when they heard the first half of Zhou Xuanji's words. But when they heard the second half, they were pleasantly surprised. Zhou Xuanji took out the lesser supreme sword as little sovereign's soul floated out. The two women were so scared that they hugged each other again. Little sovereign floated in the air looking at the two women. He then said with a satisfied smile, "They seem to have good aptitudes. Maybe they can really awaken into mortal gods. It's a waste to use them as furnaces. They should be cultivated." His words immediately made the two women feel relieved. The soul's words obviously didn't mean to harm them. Zhou Xuanji asked, "Aren't they mortal gods?" Little sovereign smiled contemptuously and said, "They just have the bloodline of mortal gods. How can a real mortal god be controlled by others? A real mortal god can be powerful enough to suppress the sovereign divine range. They are invincible under the sovereign." His words made the two women excited. Zhou Xuanji also knew how powerful mortal gods were. But his priority wasn't to cultivate them but to help him become stronger. Little sovereign saw through his thoughts and chuckled. "Actually, I know a way. Once these two mortal gods awaken their talents and cultivate with you, they can guide the inverse chaos chi into your body, helping your cultivation soar. Not only that, but they can also become stronger," Little Sovereign explained with a smile. The eyes of the two mortal gods couldn't help but light up. They also wanted to become stronger. As long as they became stronger, they could get rid of their destiny. If it was as Little Sovereign said, they were powerful enough to suppress the mortal divine range. "Tell me," Zhou Xuanji urged. He had been in Anti-Kunlun for a long time. He didn't want to wait any longer. Little Sovereign rolled his eyes and said with a sinister smile, "I can teach you this method. But there are some shortcomings in this method. When you cultivate, the inverse chaos chi will become violent. You must cultivate naked. The magical clothes will block the flow of the inverse chaos chi. Ordinary clothes will also turn into ashes." As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere instantly turned awkward. Zhou Xuanji was speechless. The mortal god sisters blushed and lowered their heads. Little Sovereign raised his brow and said, "One of you wants to become a sovereign and go against fate. The other two have a bad fate. Why don't you get married? Think about it. If you succeed in the future, you will be a sovereign and two mortal gods. You will be able to create an unprecedented golden age. No supreme martial artist could have two mortal gods who had grown to the pinnacle." Just thinking about it made Little Sovereign a little excited. Zhou Xuanji rolled his eyes at him and angrily said, "Nonsense, I don't want to marry anyone. I won't accept any woman if I have no feelings." These words didn't humiliate the two mortal gods. On the contrary, they looked at him in a different light. Chapter 775. Zhou Xuanji found it a little hard to accept the cultivation method that Little Sovereign had told him. The mortal god sisters remained silent. They also wanted to become stronger, and Zhou Xuanji had a dignified appearance and treated them well. Following someone like this was much better than becoming a cauldron for some old ancestor. What's there to bicker about? This is the only way for your cultivation base to increase quickly. Otherwise, you'll only be able to use them as cultivation materials. Little Sovereign glared at Zhou Xuanji with dissatisfaction. Why was Zhou Xuanji so hesitant at such a critical moment? Weren't you the one who insisted on obtaining the mortal god? Zhou Xuanji hesitated for a moment before sighing and saying, "All right, pass the cultivation method to us. When the time comes, I will close my eyes and shut off my divine sense. I will not look at indecent things." Hearing this, the two mortal gods nodded shyly. At the same time, they were full of expectations for the future. Their previous situation was already desperate. Now that they could become stronger, they naturally wouldn't refuse. Moreover, they were not stupid. They knew that they had no room to refuse. "Let's cultivate here. This place is between Anti-Kunlun and Kunlun Origin Court. Only those who have mastered the inverse chaos divine ability can come here." Zhou Xuanji nodded upon hearing this. He couldn't help but wonder how many people in the world had learned the inverse chaos divine art. No matter what, he still had to be careful when he cultivated in the future. Subsequently, Little Sovereign taught the three of them the cultivation method. This technique was called the red dust reversal. It was created especially for Zhou Xuanji's situation. After Zhou Xuanji learned it, he opened his eyes and asked, "Who created the red dust inverse? Could it be that someone married a mortal god and entered Anti-Kunlun by mistake?" Little Sovereign revealed a sad smile and said, "In the past, I mistakenly entered the Anti-Kunlun mountains and met a mortal god. The world calls her ancestor Jade Disc. After so many years, I don't know if she's still alive." "Female ancestor Jade Disc? Is she your wife?" The red-clothed girl cried out in surprise, and her face was filled with disbelief. The woman in the palace dress sighed and said, Female ancestor Jade Disc is the representative of the mortal deities. Who are you? They were all interested in Little Sovereign. Little Sovereign said arrogantly, I'm a sovereign. Is Jade Disc female ancestor not worthy of me? The two girls were shocked and their mouths were agape. Zhou Xuanji asked curiously, since you became the sovereign, why didn't you bring her along? Little Sovereign shook his head and said, even if you are a sovereign, you can't enter the Anti-Kunlun at will. The Anti-Kunlun also has a sovereign. His tone was a little sorrowful. The world had changed and the beauty of the past was probably gone. The red-robed girl said cautiously, Matriarch Ud seems to have. The woman glared at her, scaring her into silence. I know that she might have already fallen. After so many years, I won't be sad. If she wants to blame someone, she can only blame herself for not leaving with me back then, Little Sovereign said faintly. These past events were in the depths of his memory and he had thought about them countless times. Now that things had come to this point, he was at most depressed. Zhou Xuanji did not interrupt, but he sighed in his heart. With such a comparison, he was filled with pride. He had always tried his best to protect the people he cared about and never let himself have any regrets. All right, let's start cultivating. Then he stored the Lesser Supreme Sword into the Supreme Storage. He also told Little Sovereign not to look at him. The two girls immediately blushed upon hearing this. They shyly sat cross-legged on both sides of Zhou Xuanji. Zhou Xuanji then said, close your eyes, take off your clothes and start cultivating. Remember, don't open your eyes. I respect you, so you have to respect me too. The red-robed girl was infuriated. He said it as if they wanted to see him. However, she didn't dare to talk back since she was living under someone else's roof. Next, Zhou Xuanji took the lead in closing his eyes and began taking off his purple sky stardust robe. The two girls quickly closed their eyes and followed suit. After Zhou Xuanji took off his clothes, he waited for a few breaths before saying, let's cultivate together. The two girls were mortal gods. Their talent was naturally not bad. They quickly followed Zhou Xuanji and entered a state of cultivation. Even in this independent space, there was still the existence of Tao energy. At first, Zhou Xuanji didn't notice the existence of inverse chaos qi. But as the two girls entered a state of cultivation, he was pleasantly surprised to find inverse chaos qi around him. Even his Tao energy was skyrocketing. Tao energy and inverse chaos qi drilled into the two girls' bodies, overflowed through their pores and poured into Zhou Xuanji's body. Faintly, Zhou Xuanji also felt another special gas. Mortal qi. His cultivation began to grow faster and faster. Zhou Xuanji was overjoyed and began to concentrate on cultivation. Time flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. Zhou Xuanji's cultivation had skyrocketed. He began to break through from the peak of Tao Ancestor to one vast heaven. The cultivation of the two mortal gods had also made great progress. They had already reached the Tao Ancestor realm. The elder sister was a 7th grade flower, and the younger sister was a 2nd grade flower. In these 5 years, Zhou Xuanji didn't open his eyes. But the red-robed girl occasionally couldn't help but open her eyes. She didn't dare to look at Zhou Xuanji. 9 vast heavens. Zhou Xuanji pretended to chase after him. This shocked Beast Sovereign so much that he quickly tore the space open and fled. The 1,000-hand sword Buddha shattered, turning into golden light that filled the sky. Zhou Xuanji teleported into the carriage of the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage. The Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage followed him and flew up at an extremely fast speed. After Beast Sovereign was defeated, no one came to stop them. After another hour, they came to a cosmic space filled with purple qi. There was no trace of the divine range here. Zhou Xuanji scanned the surroundings with his divine will. He was very curious. He didn't expect that there would be such a space above the divine range. The Tao energy here was extremely abundant. There was also a lot of spiritual qi surging. It was very high level. It was even more powerful than the spiritual qi in pure sword heaven. We will soon reach the apex of Anti-Kunlun. Get ready, Little Sovereign said with a smile. A look of anticipation appeared on his face. When he went to the apex of Anti-Kunlun, he was also uneasy. But now he was only curious. Zhou Xuanji was very puzzled by his expression. Isn't this guy worried? If he is killed by the Sovereign, Little Sovereign won't survive either. Could it be that there is no danger ahead? Zhou Xuanji fell into deep thought while Xin Tang and Xin Yanqing whispered to each other. After flying for a while, suddenly the carriage shook violently. A mysterious force directly moved them out of the carriage. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes again and found himself standing above the sea of clouds. What's going on? Xin Yanqing asked nervously. Her voice was very low for fear of disturbing the sovereign. Zhou Xuanji took a deep breath and stored the Tri-Phoenix Qilin carriage into the supreme storage. He then walked forward with the lesser supreme sword in hand. Shen Tang and Shen Yinxing followed him, vigilantly watching the surroundings. The sea of clouds was layered and the sky was filled with a dazzling glow. As the three strolled forward, Little Sovereign suddenly flew out of the sword and said with a smile, "Don't worry, let's go boldly." Although Zhou Xuanji was puzzled by this, he still quickened his pace. The two women followed closely behind. They didn't dare to lose track of him. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, they saw a wooden house in front of them. Its back was filled with a dazzling glow. The scene was as beautiful as a painting. This wooden house looked simple and unremarkable, but it exuded a vast aura. Zhou Xuanji furrowed his brow. For some reason he felt that this wooden house was a little familiar. Could it be, as if he had guessed something? His pupils shrank. Impossible.